Welcome to the high-level dialogue of the Water Action Track at the Climate Adaptation Summit. Welcome, Minister van Nieuwenhuizen. I'm happy to chair this distinguished panel. It's great to see that we have ministers from the Netherlands, but also from the UK and Bangladesh, Cora van Nieuwenhuizen, Wendy Morton, and Kabir bin Anwar. And the private sector, with a young water professional from Danone, Carla Muller-Zantop. In addition, the Vice President of the World Resources Institute and the World Bank, Wanjira Matai and Jürgen Vögele, and the CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation, Patrick Verkooyen. We know water is fundamental for our existence, life, food, culture. Then again, climate change is hitting us hardest through that same water, with too much, too little, and too dirty water. Our communities flood because of typhoons or excessive rain. Crops fail because of longer droughts, and water pollutes because of heat in intensive uses. So, we must put water at the center of climate adaptation. Not only because 90% of the climate challenges are water-related, but also because water is the enabler for inclusive, comprehensive, and sustainable climate action. We need better knowledge for that, dedicated finance, and planning for adaptation. And there are so many good practices across the world we have to scale up and replicate, develop and execute them. The Water Action Track is doing just that, supporting the scaling up and acceleration through the partners and programs showcased during this event. And with the high-level panel members, I will talk today about the efforts they make on putting water at the center of climate adaptation. And I start first with Minister Cora van Nieuwenhuizen, Minister of Infrastructure and Water Management from the Netherlands, and also part of the Global Commission on Adaptation and a champion in that commission. The Netherlands co-initiated the Water Action Track for the Global Commission on Adaptation. Tell us why water is so important for adaptation, Minister.
Well, in the Netherlands, water is part of our DNA. We have been living with the challenges of water for as long as our country has existed. And we have turned those challenges into our best asset, using water management to spur our prosperity. But it's through water that the world is now feeling the effects of climate disruption most. Longer droughts, bigger floods, heavier rainfall, but also an increase in sea level and saltwater intrusion. At the same time, we often see climate policies failing to address these water-related challenges. There are positive steps and inspiring examples, but it's not enough. Water has its own sustainable development goal, but in fact, water lies at the heart of all SDGs. Investing in water boosts every single one. As the oceanographer Sylvia Earle famously said, "No water, no life, no blue, no green." So yes, the Netherlands will keep pushing for action on water. And my call to the world is, join us.
Thank you, Minister. And I hope that call will be heard during this Adaptation Summit. Next, Minister Wendy Morton, Minister for the European Neighbourhood and the Americas from the United Kingdom. I have two questions for you, Minister. And the first is, what is the UK government doing to make adaptation a central pillar of the global response to climate change?
Thank you, Henk, and thank you for inviting me to take part today, and to you and your colleagues at Dutch Water and the Global Commission on Adaptation that we both sponsored, for all that you are doing to ensure that water management is central to the global response to climate change. Turning to your question, what is the UK government doing? As this audience knows, and as the Minister has just articulated so well, water is one of the first and most obvious ways in which we notice climate change, through droughts, through floods, and in changing rainfall patterns. So to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to help all countries, rich and poor, anticipate climate change, and we need to all take actions to mitigate its worst impacts. So adaptation and resilience is a top priority for the UK government as we build up to COP26 later this year. We want to use the summit to accelerate resilience to the evolving climate and weather extremes. Investment is key. We are investing in our own resilience in the UK, and over the last 4 years, we have invested almost £6 billion of international climate finance overseas. We've pledged over £11.6 billion more over the next 5 years, and we aim to spend half on adaptation. And we will use COP26 to urge all countries to do more to build their climate resilience. And we will encourage donor countries to increase their investment in adaptation.
Thank you, Minister Morton. And my next question is how you will bring the Water Action Track results towards the COP.
Well, the UK government really appreciates the work that the Water Action Track is doing to highlight the impact of climate change on water systems and to share knowledge and experience. And the new Water Adaptation Hub will help enormously. Good water management is essential for climate resilience, so it needs to be a priority for all governments and all those in the sector, for academics and civil society, and for businesses and households. Earlier today, the UK Prime Minister announced the Adaptation Action Coalition, a new coalition to drive practical action, and of which both the Netherlands and Bangladesh, also on today's panel here today, are key members. And the UN Climate Champions teams also launched their Race to Resilience, working with businesses and civil society. And we will work together with them to ensure that water is seen as a key priority. It's certainly vital for the water sector to be fully involved in finding solutions for the climate change, as we did so well at COP25. And the UK government will work to make this happen and to make COP26 a key milestone towards climate resilient water management for all, as we build to the UN Water Summit in 2023.
Thank you, Minister Morton. I think you have a great partner in the UK in pushing this water adaptation agenda forwards, Minister van Nieuwenhuizen.
Yes, I'm delighted about this. It's a very good partnership indeed.
Very good. Good to hear. Let's get over to Bangladesh. Senior Secretary Kabir bin Anwar, welcome to this panel for the Minister of Water Resources in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is doing an amazing job at adaptation. As a front runner, can you tell us what your best practices are?
Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to all. Well, Bangladesh is one of the most climate vulnerable countries due to its unique geographical location at the tail end of the Ganges, Brahmaputra, three Meghna, three mighty rivers. So water is the key of importance for our overall socio-economic development. Bangladesh is a global leader in climate adaptation, and the government has launched numerous initiatives, large-scale adaptation initiatives and innovation, the flood forecasting, early warning system, the community cyclone shelters have become internationally best practices. Some additional selected examples are the government has initiated the development of a national adaptation plan, water in the central. The implementation of NAP will be supported by a separate action law. The long-term strategic 100-year Delta Plan 2100 has been approved and adopted. It aims to ensure water and flood security, socio-economic growth, and environmental sustainability. Innovation and adaptive integrated water resource management is key of this Delta Plan. Government of Bangladesh is planning to plant about 1 billion trees along the green belt to develop and create a green belt along the coastline to act as a storm surge barrier and sequester carbon. The coastline and the coast polders are being protected, and we are taking huge projects to rehabilitate the polders, and of course to restore the natural ecosystem, giving emphasis on the dredging of the major rivers, canals, ponds, and harbor bills, etc. So these are the key initiatives we are taking and practicing.
Thank you, Secretary Kabir bin Anwar. How can we better cooperate and create sustainable partnerships regarding water and adaptation in the view of Bangladesh?
Well, we are actively guiding nations to scale up and accelerated water climate adaptation. We are greatly benefited from the dynamic leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, to create and synergize between water and climate adaptation. She is a proactive member of the high-level panel of water. Our Prime Minister is also the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum to strengthening and accelerate climate adaptation. And she recently inaugurated CGS Regional Center in Dhaka. Bangladesh also chaired the Delta Coalition recently. However, there is always a scope to improve further cooperation and develop sustainable partnership. We are looking forward to deepen our collaboration with countries such as Netherlands. I should mention in this regard that which we have with the Netherlands, we are enjoying 50 years of partnership already. So we are looking forward.
Thank you, Senior Secretary Kabir bin Anwar. It's great and amazing to hear such a front-runner and a partner on climate adaptation action, Minister van Nieuwenhuizen.
Yes, a long-standing relation, and I can only underline how important it is that Bangladesh is so active because they have very valuable best practices to share.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go to Danone, Carla Muller-Zantop, Advocacy and Transformation Manager for the water cycle at Danone and young water professional. Carla, what is Danone doing regarding a global agenda on water and adaptation?
Thank you very much. So I joined Danone as I've always been passionate about the need to transform food companies to have the greatest environmental impact. And while it was by chance that I entered the water cycle team, I quickly realized that water is at the core of so many climate risks we face. And the paradox to me is that we all have the resources and we know what must be done, such as nature-based solutions and regenerative agriculture. And yet, despite absolute urgency, the required change is not happening fast enough. And private companies like Danone have commitments to become water impact positive, acting where it matters most, targeting the full landscape beyond the factory gates, aiming for water, carbon, and biodiversity benefits. But these local actions require the support of a global agenda to reach their full potential. And the role of the public sector is fundamental. So we call for bold policies from governments, policies that simplify local water governance, create economic incentives, and value water and nature for what it's really worth.
Thank you, Carla. You're also a young water professional. Can you expand a bit on the role of youth in developing this global agenda on water and adaptation?
As a young woman dedicated to solving our world's water crises, my peers are often shocked that I'm working for a global food company. But the way I see it, large companies have the ability to drive real change in food systems. And importantly, this change requires tangible engagement with youths who have ideas, grit, and energy to make a difference. Too often, businesses and governments do not take our opinions into account regarding the choices affecting our, but also your future. And this creates conflict. With Fridays for Future, your children are in the streets protesting that you as adults have failed in tackling climate change adequately. And it's clear that being more aware of our environmental challenges than ever before, my generation is no longer satisfied with a simple, interesting job and good pay. We require a deep sense of purpose and want to be part of the solution. So we can create that together. Give us greater responsibility and autonomy in your organizations, and a real chance to speak up, just as Danone has given me a voice here today. This will pull passionate minds towards you and motivate even more young people to take action.
Thank you, Carla, for your inspiration and dedication. Isn't this what we need, Minister van Nieuwenhuizen?
Well, exactly. This is a win-win situation, involvement of enthusiastic young people and the private sector. So it's very good.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Carla. Then over to the World Resources Institute, Vice President for Sustainable Development and Regional Director for Africa, Wanjira Matai. tell us, how can you make the translation from a World Resources Institute perspective on the data, the numbers, the science into real action?
Great question. We approach the challenge of translating science to action by working on both data knowledge on that side and the innovations of how you use data for decision making. So at a nutshell, that is WRI's approach. We count it, we change it, we scale it. So very rigorous data analysis backed by literature reviews that informs policymaking. And that's what has really been how we work. For example, on water, on a water resource base, we assess different scales and types of water, whether it's surface water, runoff water, or groundwater. And then we invest in innovative ways of packaging and presenting that information so it's accessible and usable. So just as an example, WRI has a data tool which we call Aqueduct, and it maps water risks across the globe. We believe that having such data presented in user-friendly ways with open access can play a really crucial role in making connections with other dynamics like climate change. Now, the magic really happens when you get to the granular level, when you start to interact with decision makers. So in Ethiopia, for example, we are collaborating with water authorities to actually quantify and map water scarcity, and with the objective of ensuring that connecting this data with the development planning process and then deploying innovative solutions to build resilience. Now, we have a pilot program that seeks to use this data on water scarcity for the design of payment for ecosystem service. All of this made much easier when you have data to make the case for you. So we're building on this data to work on urban water resilience.
Thanks, Wanjira. And that also builds the case to calculate the added value of adaptation, right?
Absolutely. Now, you have to recognize, and we all do, that assets are designed only for the current climate conditions and too narrowly optimized in short timescales. Rebuilding these assets in the future could be a much more expensive endeavor than building climate resilient assets today. A critical message that we need to deliver. Investing in climate resilient infrastructure today is simply more cost effective. And that's where those calculations have to be done and kept in mind. It's extremely important to acknowledge that adaptation's actions can generate multiple dividends, including avoiding significant losses like stranded assets, economic benefits from reduced vulnerability, increased productivity from flood-resistant crops and other higher yield crops, building better irrigation systems, and then, of course, appealing investment opportunities. In addition, when social and environmental benefits are well integrated and valued in adaptation actions, they can offer compelling business propositions. Now, for instance, Adapt Now, the report, and the minister, thank you so much for all that work. It estimates that mangrove forests provide more than 80 billion in avoided losses per year for coastal flooding, while protecting 18 million people, and then providing $40 to $50 billion per year in socio-environmental benefits, like improved fisheries, forestry, recreational opportunities, including good air quality and cleaner water. A very compelling economic argument for investment with a benefit-cost ratio of sometimes up to 10-1. Very hard to argue against that.
Thank you so much, Wanjira. It's almost too good to be true. But the added value of not only preventing the risks, but creating these opportunities is, of course, great in the climate adaptation space, Minister.
Well, I cannot say it better. We simply cannot be sure that we build back better, that we build resilient, if you do not have the right state-of-the-art knowledge and the data. You really need that. Yeah.
It's critical important, and also for the projects of the World Bank, I guess. With us, Vice President Jürgen Vögele. Thanks, Jürgen, for joining us. Why is, next to mitigation, of course, adaptation so important for the investments the World Bank is making?
Well, thanks, Henk, for having me here and having us, the World Bank, in this panel. It's wonderful to listen to Wanjira, given the economics of why we need to do the right things. That's typically what we do. And we work, of course, very closely with the WRI on the data, as she pointed out, which is a huge part of moving things forward. Of course, for us, adaptation is hugely important at the World Bank because our countries are already facing climate change in a very serious manner. The water supplies, the infrastructure, the ecosystems, and ultimately livelihoods and the whole economies are affected by this. We heard it before from the minister and other speakers. There is too many droughts, there are too many floods. It's either too little or it's too much or it's too polluted. What we need to do is help our client countries, and particularly the poorest because they get affected the most, understand what it is they can do to build and become more resilient in these challenges. So we think about it in a little more creative way nowadays. It was also very good to hear our young water champion from Danone talk about you got to engage with the local communities, you got to bring the private sector in, and you got to find solutions that combine everything we have. One thing we do is we co-sponsor the Water Resources Group 2030, which is actually co-sponsored by Nestle, by Paul Buiki, who is the co-chair together with myself, where we do exactly that. Go at the country level, try to understand what is the challenge the water sector is facing and what can be done to strengthen adaptation, give the private sector, the big and the large and the small companies the opportunity to do things right, to help transform the food systems and to protect the ecosystem services that are so critical. So we're changing our approach here as well. And we want to have local people in the driver's seat. Very good collaboration, by the way, also with Bangladesh in that particular group, with very practical solutions coming forward.
Thanks.
Back to you.
Thanks, Jürgen. Some inspiring examples from the World Bank, I must say. It's great to see. It's also the ones we need to scale up. Are there any examples you want to share more?
Well, there are plenty of examples, right? I just mentioned a couple. Another one is our work in Somalia. Somalia has faced 14 droughts in the last 13 years, very serious ones. You will recall the horrific pictures a couple of years ago. And it also had several major flood events at the same time, I mean, in different times of the year, but in the same environment. So people are really suffering, and we've helped them with creative sand dams, for instance, to reduce evaporation rather than open surface water storage, with creative, innovative solutions to improve the situation there. Those small-scale water schemes helped up to 250,000 people. Another example is what we do together with the government of Poland, where we in the Odra River Basin integrate wetlands with human build infrastructure to protect against floods. These projects harness natural landscapes known as the dry polders, and you know about this, of course, better than anyone in the world, in the Netherlands, which act as a natural sponge in the event of a flood. And then in Brazilian state of Espírito Santo, we helped introduce a payment for ecosystem services, which has been around as a concept and as a practical pilot and experiment for a good number of years. And this helps protect the watersheds, and it of course also reduces the investment needs for water utilities to invest in expensive filtration systems. So there's lots of different ways of doing these things. We at the World Bank have made a commitment already 2 years ago that we cannot only, and we have to, of course, invest heavily in mitigation because that's the only way to reduce the footprint, but that we at the same time will also seriously invest in adaptation. We have done about 50% of our climate co-benefits in the last 3 years around adaptation. And for a total, I think this year we're going to land somewhere between 21 to 23 billion US dollars overall in climate co-benefits in our portfolio, and 50% of that will go to adaptation, particularly for the poorest countries.
Very good to hear, Jürgen, the commitment of the World Bank. It's also the inspiration and the scale, Minister, these smaller scale projects, but then expanding them across the world that makes a partnership with the World Bank so critical important.
Yes, and I also would like to underline what Jürgen said about the local people in the driver's seat. I think that's very important because every situation, we're all in trouble, but every situation is unique and we need the local knowledge.
Yeah, it's of critical importance and it's resonating across this whole panel. Thank you, Minister. Now over to a pre-recorded message by the CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation, Patrick Verkooyer, who I earlier asked, hearing these statements by your fellow and panel participants, we prepped him a bit. What are we going to do? What are you going to do from the Global Center on Adaptation?
First, let me thank the Netherlands government for its leadership on this very important topic. At the GCA, we understand that water is the critical resource that underpins all our social and economic activity. Without it, food production stops, cities cease to function, and economic activity halts. At-scale adaptation needs to be underpinned by predictable budgets and governance for agile planning and effective coordination. Local communities must be empowered to identify, prioritize, implement, and monitor climate adaptation solutions. As a solutions broker, GCA seeks to bring stakeholders together to scale up water adaptation at
Okay. How are you going to keep everyone to his or her commitments, Patrick?
Well, thank you for this important question indeed. There are a series of initiatives that are being launched by GCA as part of our overall water adaptation program. One, there is an urgent need to increase investments in water adaptation. To address this finance gap, GCA, together with the African Development Bank, is building a Build Smart project preparation facility for Africa. Two, to highlight the successful adaptation stories in world deltas, GCA is launching the Lighthouse Delta Case Study Report today. Three, GCA is launching the City Adaptation Accelerator to support cities do better understand the impacts of climate change and to support them in developing bankable projects. African Development Bank also here is a key partner. There is a need to connect water and climate dialogues, support learning and sharing, and reduce fragmentation in the water sector. For this purpose, GCA is launching the Water Adaptation Community here today. Please join us.
Thank you, Patrick. That's great to hear, encouraging. So there's a sign of hope that so many of our partners are getting on track, putting water at the heart of climate adaptation. Minister van Nieuwenhuizen, what can we expect from the Netherlands moving forward regarding water and adaptation in the future?
Well, we started the Global Commission on Adaptation and this action track to set the world on a path towards impactful climate action. And of course, we will continue this journey together. The launch of the Water Adaptation Hub this week supports us all in moving ahead, speeding and scaling up. We will also continue to push for water to be at the top of everyone's agenda as the enabler of climate action. And that's why we will be working with the UK towards COP26 and helping to strengthen water's position in the NDCs. Also, the Netherlands will be co-hosting the UN Water Conference in 2023, together with Tajikistan. And of course, we'll continue to practice what we preach. By scaling up water programs, projects on governance and knowledge, and with nature-based solutions, we'll continue to help delta countries around the world to prepare for a challenging future. Prevention pays. It benefits people, our environment, and our economy. We will continue to forge partnerships, creating a better future.
Thank you, Minister. Putting it together, we have to work together. We have to put our collective strengths up front, across sectors, across silos, working together across the world. The Water Action Track stands ready to lead and facilitate this. We started the Water Adaptation Hub, and we bring the world together. We must step up, put water at the heart of climate action and adaptation through our policies and our NDCs. And later on in this show, we will show much more on all these best practices.
I can only support what you say, Henk. We need to come together on water. We need to put our money where our mouth is. And that's even more important now during this pandemic. Nothing and no one can live without water. It's our duty to take better care of it. But countries can't do this alone. We need the world to join together. Now.
With this call to action, we've come to an end of this inspiring panel discussion. Thanks to all participants, thanks to Minister van Nieuwenhuizen, Minister Morton, State Secretary Mr. Kabir bin Anwar, Mrs. Carla Muller-Zantop from Danone, Vice President Matai from the WRI, and Vice President Vögele from the World Bank, and the CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation, Mr. Verkooyen. It's time to act, scale up, and inspire the world.